Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar with SlashNext on real-time phishing threat intelligence. Appreciate you folks joining us live today, and for those of you catching the replay on demand at some future time, also welcome and appreciate your interest in this topic. So today we are going to focus on this new offering, this new type of threat intelligence that is being made available now from SlashNext, and kind of how it can be used to better understand and protect your organizations against the new wave of zero-hour social engineering threats. So what we're going to be covering today is really in three parts here. And first off, let me say again, hello everyone. My name is Jan Laban. I'm the head of marketing here at SlashNext, and I'll be joined today as our main presenter is the CEO and founder of SlashNext, which is Atif Mushtaq. So he'll be speaking here in just a moment. But what we really want to cover is really what is changed, what is going on in the phishing threat landscape. We're also familiar with, email phishing attacks and everything, but things have expanded in many ways in that, and the attacks are very numerous and moving very quick. So we'll cover some of the dynamics, there that are also dictating the need for new types of phishing threat detection. And we'll go into some technical details there on new types of detection methods for phishing threats, and then how that's also used to fuel and produce real-time phishing threat intelligence. And then we'll have a quick wrap-up, at the end. So without further ado, we'll jump into it, but I'll just cover briefly a little more about SlashNext itself, the company, and then we'll jump into it. Just briefly on SlashNext, just for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a privately held firm, been around for about 5 years now, headquartered out in the Silicon Valley area, and our big focus is really on protecting organizations from phishing and social engineering attacks, and particularly those come from all the new attack vectors that are out there. And so this is something we've been at for quite a while, and some of our products have been on the market now for about 3 years, so getting pretty deep into the social engineering and phishing space. The real-time phishing threat intelligence, which we're going to be covering today, is a relatively new offering and output from our platform, and we'll go into some of the technical details there for everyone. So let's look at the phishing threat landscape and really what's changed out there. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Atif.
Yeah, sure, Jan. Thanks. So I think one of the, first of all, the graphs that is in front of us right now is created by Google. Right, and the source of this data is the millions of Chrome users out there. So what this thing clearly tells us that the overall threat landscape is actually shifting towards phishing. If you go back in 2007 and 2009, you can see that malware were the dominant attack vector for the internet users. Phishing was definitely out there, but it was not the number one infection vector. But then over the year, we are seeing it transitioning happening where now you can see the malwares, they actually are the minority players now. And when it comes to evading into the organization's assets or the personal data, phishing has actually become the first choice for the bad guys. And one obvious reason for that is the lack of defense. Over the years, there are different vendors have come. I mean, you have the next-gen AV now, you have the conventional antivirus, Sandbox, EDR. All of these guys are giving a malware a very hard time. So at that time, the bad guys thought, okay, let's go where the defenses are not very sophisticated. And this is where you're seeing the rise of phishing, because they know that most of the antivirus and the existing technologies that are focused on malware, they're not even designed to catch phishing and social engineering attack. Mm-hmm. So this is the main thing that is happening, and this is we are seeing across our own networks as well. We've been in business for the last 3 years, and in the early days, we are catching a lot more malware than we're catching right now. And now wherever we go, more than 90% of the infection that we see across our customer base are predominantly the phishing and social engineering attacks. So the trend is real and is happening right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing also is, I think, just kind of worth noting is this is showing the total number of detections per week that Google finds reported both from the vendors they work with, that they also consume from threat intelligence from other vendors, and also their own technology. And, together they're finding around 30 to maybe 40,000 new sites per week. And that number is relevant because we'll come contrast that with the threat intelligence we're going to see a little bit later on. So
that's right.
Okay. And then, okay.
So I talk about that, how people shifted from malware to phishing. But there's another thing that is happening is that not only the attackers are moving away from malware to the phishing, at the same time they're reinventing the phishing landscape. If you see a classical phishing paradigm, it was something like that. I mean, you'll get an email and there'll be a link in that email. When you click on that, it'll be a fake login page, right? That's no longer the case. It's still out there, but we are seeing a lot more type of attack that are happening under the umbrella of phishing. Nowadays, we are seeing phishing spreading through not just email, but also spreading through social media, also spreading through advertisement, Google search, and all that, right? So phishing links has no, as such, fixed input infection vector. They're coming all over the place. And at the same time, fake login pages is not just the only game in town. Now we are seeing people are using phishing to spread the rogue browser extensions to compromise your browser and evade two-factor authentication. At the same time, we are seeing people conducting technical support scams. We are seeing people performing Bitcoin theft, credit card theft. So again, all type of social engineering mechanisms are getting added under the social engineering and the phishing category. And if there's an organization that feels that the email and the phishing filter was enough for them back in 2008, that's no longer the case. Yeah, can you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
And another thing that is happening is that bad guys know that how people are trying to catch them. When it comes to the detection or the phishing detection, I hate to say it, but the current defenses are very, I would say, still following the legacy method. Most of the phishing vendors out there, they're still relying on the domain reputation and the URL blacklisting. And this is where the bad guys are seeing a perfect opportunity. All they have to do is to change their domains and URLs fast enough that the blacklisting-based engine cannot really keep up with this thing. So this is a very good graph. And back in the day, you can see that, okay, an average life of a URL was a lot higher than what it is right now. And most of the URLs that we are seeing across in our feed, I think their average life is 40 to 50 minutes. They come and go pretty quickly. They host it on Amazon or GoDaddy sites, and people click on that within few minutes of that. They collect all the data, and then they move away to the next site. And by the time the thread feeds are catching up to that thing, the attack has already moved and it's actually hosted on somewhere else. And this is a speed that the security vendors are currently dealing with. And there's no doubt that the old legacy method of chasing URLs and doing the domain reputation is no longer enough.
Right. And also with so many sites, the phishing sites, we see, and we also see reported out there through the Google stats where the majority or large majority of the phishing sites are hosted on compromised but otherwise legitimate domains. So they would pass the domain reputation test, but they're still hosting the malicious pages on them.
Exactly right. So again, if you see the 90% of the URLs that are in our feed, either they're hosting on the compromised domain or they're hosted on legitimate cloud services like SharePoint, GoDaddy site, CloudFront, Amazon AWS. And how can you even blacklist Amazon or the SharePoint, right?
Right.
Every online service that gives you space to host a HTML page, bad guys are actually misusing that cloud service. And again, it's all an attempt to evade domain reputation-based engines.
Yeah, they're getting clever. So another thing, and then looking here, one thing this happens often. We're interacting with security teams, and they go, well, but we have two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, so we're protected.
I think again, when it comes to the fake login pages, of course, I mean, one of the things that, the birth of two-factor authentication itself is a proof that people knew that the anti-phishing defense systems are not longer working, right? So they came up with the second factor. First of all, now we are seeing a lot more phishing kit that can bypass second factor by man in the browser. And at the same time, there are a lot of phishing attacks that do not even involve the fake login pages. I'll give you an example of a phishing attack that is asking you to install a browser extension. Now, by design, once you install a browser extension, it has access to the complete canvas of the browser. And we are seeing malicious Chrome extensions. They simply wait for the second factor phase to be over. Once the phase is over, they simply hijack the session and simply start scraping whatever is being rendered on the computer screen. So your second, third factor or your dongle can't really protect you because they're waiting for you to log in legitimately before they can start scraping data from your browser. And you have an extension that has the full power to do whatever you're doing or see whatever you're seeing within that browser window. At the same time, you have the technical support scam that asks you to install a TeamViewer or some other log me in like software. They log in remotely and then they perform their fake scanning, and at the end they leave this TeamViewer or the log me session open and then sell it in the black market. So in that case, you have a scammer who installed a legitimate backdoor, a TeamViewer, which is not a malware, but it gives you the complete backdoor capability and sell the credentials to the dark web, right? And now what you can do, you have the best of the breed antivirus out there. The bad guys are just trying to beat you with a telephone fraud, right? And so there's a lot of other examples. Then there are phishing C2s and all that, and none of those can be prevented through your security dongle or the two-factor authentication.
Exactly. Yeah. I got a couple screenshots we assembled to kind of illustrate some of these new phishing types here. I mean, everyone is familiar with fake login pages to various business applications or SharePoint or Office 365 is a very common target. Obviously PayPal and the other financial ones, but in the businesses things, they're often less concerned about, okay, so your iCloud account, info gets stolen, big deal. That's not going to endanger corporate stuff. But when it's to a business app or some kind of shared file system like Box or something like that, obviously there's a lot more at stake there. But these other types that you just mentioned, yeah, like the fake, the malicious browser extensions that might even start friendly, like they're available on the Chrome store or that sort of thing, and they might start fine, but then they get an online update and then become malicious.
That's right. I mean, this is the way they're evading Google security checks. So by default, these extensions are capable of updating or downloading JavaScript on the fly, right? So when they submit their Chrome extension to the Google, it has a legitimate functionality. It's just a download routine, right? And once you install it, then they download the malicious script from the web. And at that time, that code was not even vetted by Google, right? So that is a runtime code. Once you close the browser, it goes away. But when you launch the browser, they download it again. So again, you have the code that is living inside the browser memory with JavaScript. And JavaScript is the most common thing you can find inside a browser, right? So there's no way you can distinguish between a malicious JavaScript that is downloading or scraping data than a JavaScript that's being rendered by a legitimate page, right? So this is how they are trying to fool you. Again, and once these guys install, they have access to the complete canvas. For example, if you log into your ServiceNow management portal, right, you go through the second factor and all that, and they simply wait for that. They get the event once the login phase is complete, and this is where they start scraping data. So your whole cloud infrastructure is completely open and vulnerable against this extension because one of your employee got scammed by an advertisement that, okay, this is a cool application. If you can install it, we're going to make your life easy. Sometimes they say, okay, you can log into your email faster, or you can download this PDF converter and all that. And all these people think that, okay, they look like legitimate and they're very fancy looking extensions, right? And they have really put together some hard work on creating these things, and they have the legitimate functionality, but they have a side business. And that's the reason that they're offering it for free. Because this is how they're actually selling your data internally, but at the same time offering you a legitimate functionality.
Right, or serving as a man in the middle, man in the browser thing, and scraping the second factor, or
that's right.
Yeah. So, and then another scareware and tech support scams. are also out there, and this is a lot of the phishing threat intelligence and detection systems don't really detect these.
And the reason is that they're just trying to fool you with text, right? I mean, there's nothing really inherently wrong with the text when it comes to the AV-like analysis, right? There's no exploit in it. There's no malware in it. There's someone who's trying to scare you and asking you to give that person the remote access, right? And then the real damage happens after that. So once they come in, then instead of planting a backdoor, they ask you to install a legitimate remote support software like TeamViewer, right, or the LogMeIn. Now, AVs are not going to stop TeamViewer from getting installed, right? So again, you fool a guy with a scare tactics, get the TeamViewer, and then you sell that TeamViewer license, TeamViewer credential into the dark web. Now, whoever wants to attack your organization, they don't have to send you a phishing email. They can simply go to the dark web and buy the credentials from there, and then they can remotely log in to that person's computer. And most of the targeted attack, I mean, there's another thing that I forgot to talk about. I mean, most of the targeted attacks are actually happening by buying data from the dark web. I mean, gone are the days where nation state would actually send you a phishing mail and they really work hard to penetrate into your organization. Now they can simply go to dark web and they already have infected machines or your employees' infected machines out there registering with their cloud. All they have to do is to pay that middleman some dollar to give you the access to their computer. They don't have to go at length and try to scam you. They know that every organization has infected computers and the employees' information is compromised. So why don't we spend some dollars and save the time? So this is how a common crimeware attack is getting morphed into a targeted attack thanks to dark web.
Right. So if there's a compromised machine in terms of a malicious browser extension, or they've had some of this TeamViewer things on it, then that machine's compromised and could be available for sale. So
yeah, it's available for sale. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The other one, the scare. This is not a scareware tech support thing. This is more like the games and social engineering scams.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of times it's for credit card fraud, but again, it's also to get you to create an account and then look at your password patterns and use it for brute force.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only again the motives are the same. In this case, usually they try to excite you instead of scaring you into doing something. They're actually giving you a reward. End of the day, they actually get you enter your information by making you excited. For example, you just won an iPhone, and then they start asking a series of questions, right? And there'll be the first page. Once you go there, they'll say, okay, you're 20% done. And then there is a new questionnaire, right? And then there's another question. I've done this multiple times. They keep on asking you confidential information, and every time they say, okay, you're just 10% away from winning an iPhone.
Yeah.
Again, the purpose is exactly the same, either to install a software or asking you to give up your confidential information. The method is different. Sometimes they scare you, sometimes they pretend to be a legitimate entity, and sometimes they simply make you excited. I would say, try to invoke your greed, right? And in that case, they get whatever they want from your side. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with these things, because on the internet you really have some legitimate rewards going on as well. So the system don't even have a way to distinguish between, okay, this is legitimate and this is not legitimate, because they're actually launching all these attacks, intermingling with the very fabric of internet, advertisement and all that. There's no way out of 10 ads, there's one ad that is malicious, but that is exactly looking like the rest of the stuff.
Right. And then all this is just normal web traffic. There's no, like I say, there's no files, there's no malware to detect, there's nothing. It's just normal web traffic, and yet it's, getting through to the users and employees.
That's right.
Yeah. So in this context here, we've kind of looked through some of the landscape, where here's some of the samples and some of the scams and things that are even just beyond regular credential stealing with fake login pages. So in order to have phishing threat intelligence that can help protect an organization or inform a security team, or SOC about these different threats, it has to be able to detect them. And that's what I want to cover a little bit here is like the actual threat detection engine. As we call it here at FlashNext, we call SEER, which stands for Session Emulation and Environment Reconnaissance. So, Tiff, you had a big hand in creating this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I think if I have to, I mean, the technology is quite complex, but if I have to explain it in a one line, I would say that we're trying to detect phishing with the behavior analysis of the content. Pretty much everyone in the industry is trying to guess out of the phishing URL and the domain, and that data is simply not accurate enough to determine if a URL is phishing or not. What we are doing is the natural way. I mean, whenever we see something suspicious looking, we actually load it in a virtual browser in our cloud and actually render the whole page. And then we analyze the content of that page with respect to the natural language processing, with respect to the image processing, and actually see it exactly how it looks like. What is the context of that page? If someone is asking you to buy something for free for $1, our system can actually render that page, and it can see that someone is offering you iPhone, and it is asking you for your username and password. So again, we're trying to detect fish a human way. I would say phishing is a human problem, and I believe that the way to solve this phishing problem is try to detect it in a humanly fashion, right? So again, how would a tech-savvy user would detect a fish? I mean, usually we don't remember all these URLs, right? None of us can remember all these millions of blacklisted URLs. Our mechanism is very simple, right? I mean, if I am a tech-savvy user, I look at the content of that page. I use my ability to read and see things. I also have my experience there because the phishing sites exist, and then I cross-verify with the origin of that site. And whenever there's a mismatch, I say, yeah, it's a phishing page, and I close my browser. The problem is that the number of tech-savvy users are very less in number, and most of the employees, they're not even trained to detect this type of stuff. So when it comes in front of them from a legitimate source, like from your browsing to the internet on the CNBC, and suddenly there's a ad redirect that happens, and suddenly there's a page that is asking you for some information, they can't even find that, okay, this is not part of CNBC, right? And they simply fall victim to that. But at the same time, our system doesn't really care about it, because what we have done is to train this system against a historical, I would say maybe millions of websites that has been written historically for the phishing and for the benign purposes. So it's just like that. Okay, you hire a phishing training company, right? And you train your employees. Instead of we training our employees, we have trained our software to detect phishing. And because we are not relying on the URL reputation itself, so it doesn't really matter that it's being hosted on SharePoint. I don't really care if it is asking for something fishy, then it must be a phishing page, regardless of the URL. So that is actually the main crux of the technology. Do it with the behavior analysis, with rendering the page at real time, so that you can exactly see and read what the actual user would do, and then you make a determination based on that.
Right. So if we look at I'm trying to move the slide forward, kind of what's going on within the SEER detection, right? So, I mean, the suspicious URLs, are sourced both from our global sensor network, which, we have an appliance at the internet egress points of a large customer network, examining, doing real-time web page scanning of billions of URLs per day, and also our proprietary dynamic, sources, both feeding, this SEER threat detection action. And I think what you'd mentioned there, kind of came out. We're really looking at the page, doing the language translation, doing the processing, looking at the semantics, using optical character recognition to, lift text out of images, which is a common thing that phishers do, is try to hide the text within images so they can't be read. But could you speak a little bit about the active site behavior analysis? This is pretty unique, relative.
Yeah, I think again, along with the natural language processing and the text analysis, another part very important is how that site is behaving within your browser, right? For example, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? For example, if there's a technical support scam website, I mean, you'll suddenly see a lot of pop-ups on your screen. They won't let you even close that browser. And if you try to close the browser tab, they all come up with all these type of evasion technique. That's actually very guilty behavior, right? If there's a website that is asking for the login credentials, and if you enter the dummy credentials, right, they simply accept it because those websites don't have information for the legitimate credentials, right? So whenever whatever you give them, they simply accept it. Or when you give them the invalid credential, they lead you to the legitimate website, right? Usually when there's a login success, you actually go to the same website, right? So all these type of behavior traits also get considered to get a better detection. Again, instead of relying a tiny piece of information from the domain name or the pattern, you're actually going after the whole set of behavior analysis on the page itself. It means that this analysis generates a lot more data, and with lot more data, you have a lot more leverage and accuracy that you get out of it. So because you're not even relying on the one or two factors, you're relying on hundreds of different factors before you make a determination. And that's the result that we have extremely low false positive, almost near zero, right? And a lot of people, that's the reason people are actually very willing to feed our thread feed into their firewalls or the DNS server, because they know that, okay, we don't generate false positive, right? And again, that comes from analyzing a very rich set of data in the first place. Otherwise, one or two false positive and everybody suddenly starts hitting your thread feed, right? And that's the reason that most of the thread feed they're not even suitable for the blocking purposes. People usually buy them for the research. We are actually marketing our thread feed for the instant blocking, and we can tell them, okay, you're not gonna get any false positive, so you don't have to fear that one day your half the internet is gone because someone blacklisted a very legitimate website.
Right. 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 So let's focus just a bit here on the phishing. So this is the detection engine that's used to produce the threat intelligence. Let's go into more specifics then on the characteristics of a real-time phishing threat intelligence.
Yeah. So very first thing I would like to add that, okay, when we say phishing feed, actually it's a combination of 6 subfields. Actually, we deal with not just the fake login pages or the exploit. We deal with all range of phishing attacks, and that's one of our core strengths. So our phishing feed is actually consists of 6 different feeds. There's some people who buy all 6 feeds. For example, fake login is one feed, technical support scam is one feed, rogue software is another feed, right? And you can bundle it up according to your choice. Again, so we are giving you the choice. Either you can bundle it up all through the same standard API, or if you just want to start with one or two things, for example, you think, okay, the fake login is your number one problem, and there's a budget problem, you can actually start with just the fake login pages. And we offer it with a very easy to access API that supports JSON. We support CSV. So if you have a firewall that can consume JSON or CSV, most of them do. At the same time, you have the same. It's very easy to integrate. All you need to do is to ask us the key, and within 4 to 5 minutes, you're up and running. There's no problem at all.
And how many? I mean, this often contrasted. I know their system. It's currently finding tens of thousands of new phishing, per day, and it's going to vary. I mean, some days might be 10,000, some days might be 100,000. Depends how much,
Yeah, it really depends how active bad guys are. Actually, one of the interesting things is that over the weekend, that overall threat feed volume decreased by around 50% because the bad guys are actually taking a break. So by the U.S. Sunday morning, we suddenly see a spike. It's pretty interesting trend that over the weekend, the infection rate actually a little bit stops. But by the Monday and Tuesday, it goes up to. So again, it varies. But at any given stage, you can expect around 50,000 live URLs in our feed. And another great thing about our feed is that unlike many other feeds who don't have a retirement mechanism, so we just talk about that how these domains are using compromised domains, and they just are live for about 1 hour or so, right? So it means there's a need that once a ledger-based website is no longer infected, you have to remove it from your blacklist. Otherwise, you're going to keep legitimate website blacklisted forever, right? So we have a very robust retirement mechanism in place. So whatever we detect malicious, we keep on checking it dynamically at the background. And the moment we see that, okay, this URL is no longer malicious, we simply take this thing out of the feed. And if it's come back, we'll put it again, right? So advantage is that, first of all, you only have access to the live phishing URLs. At the same time, if you're using our feed for the blocking purposes, you can feel comfortable that, okay, we are not gonna jam your firewalls with millions of URLs or the dead domains. You'll always get a small list of very live phishing attacks, and the moment the attack is gone, you're no longer blocking that thing.
Right, right. And the volume, like you said, so it's kind of a living, dynamic list, like a real-time shield of this what's live now. There, and then as soon as we see that it's no longer active, then it's removed from the list. So it's not that ever-growing list. It's live phishing threat intel. So if we look also, we talked a little bit about how it's sourced and that sort of thing, and then talk a little bit about how it different use cases for it, how can it be consumed by the different pieces there.
So so first of all, I mean, all of this feed is we're taking dynamic data from the dynamic sources. So a big part of our thread feed is getting generated out of the data that we're receiving at our email honeypots, or we call it spam traps. So what happens that we have the spam trap that are actually listening for all these spam emails with dummy accounts, and whenever they get a spam email, they extract the link and feed it to our engine, and within few minutes it will be available for the blacklisting if it is malicious, right? At the same time, we also have a hardware-based offering in terms of appliance for the target attack protection. So whatever we're catching across our customer base, that actually also gets contributed to the thread feed. And so you have a very live input to the system. So obviously the output is also real time, because the speed really matters here. If you're just late by 45 minutes, the attack is already gone, right? So that's the reason that a lot of other thread feed vendors are struggling, because the input is slow and then their processing is slow as well, because of semi-manual analysis. In our case, we're taking the live data stream, either coming out of our hardware sensors or the spam trap or shady ads, and it gets processed without any manual intervention and becomes available in a very easy to integrate fashion. And that's the speed that you need if you really want to protect the attack. Otherwise, detecting a phishing URL after 2 hours is pretty useless, because the attack has already moved. And then, of course, once you have this threat feed, you can feed it to your SIM for the correlation with the firewall logs. You can see how many infected machines are there and all that. You can feed it to your blocking infrastructure if you want. And if you have a threat intelligence platform, you can simply integrate our feed in there, and we kind of become part of your unified blocking feed through that. So again, it's very easy to integrate. We are offering the REST API with the JSON, which is a worldwide standard. So there's no customization is needed on your end in order to leverage our feed.
Right. So you're saying that with the threat intelligence here, it's not only it's produced in real time, generated in real time, and then available via API, covering all 6 types of these the social engineering threats, and then the user has the choice of what they want to pull down, just domains or full URLs, different formats. All that sort of. It really depends on what their system requires, or what the researcher requires.
Yep.
So we're gonna just wrap it up here, because we promised folks we'd keep it to around a half hour, and around that point. So a couple things that I want to make that I think was really good that you covered. The change in the phishing threat landscape, the fact that the attacks are coming and going so quickly, that so many are hosted on compromised but otherwise legitimate websites, so they would evade normal URL inspection, things like that. That it's like you really need this much more automated, sort of a more thorough approach, for actually detecting the threats in order to reduce this kind of threat, intelligence. So it's really the bad guys are smart, right? They keep figuring out ways to work away around other methods of detection and things like that. So with this sort of approach, right now in terms of producing threat intelligence, it's a much more automated approach with much higher levels of accuracy. It's looking at many more features or characteristics of the site, and then the definitive verdict. And I'm not sure if we mentioned this earlier, but quite a few, or in fact many security technologies produce a threat risk score of something, a probability of it being malicious or suspicious, whereas this is binary.
This is binary. We don't have any. If we are not sure about anything, we simply don't mark it as malicious because people are using it for the real-time blocking. And there's nothing like a scoring. Okay, 50% time block it, right? We want to be 100% sure. Otherwise, people won't even use this thing for the blocking purposes. So there's no. It's not a. We are not offering a monitoring threat feed. We are offering something that can solve the problem, right? Can stop attack before it happens, and for that you need to be extremely accurate and 100% sure.
Right, and also be able to, like, say, do that proactive or kind of preemptive threat hunting. So we have both the live sensors feeding the detection engine, but also the thing that's out scouring the web and firing up the virtual browsers and looking at things before there's even a patient zero, or a
That's right.
zero, for it in some cases. But of course, in some cases, if it's a pure spear phishing attack, single individual in an organization, then sometimes it's really good. Your best last defense is to have like a targeted phishing defense, like we have when you have something actually looking at your actual network traffic to detect it.
That is part of what we're targeted, because there's always a chance that, there's a very customized attack. And for that, people are leveraging our real-time scanning hardware. And the job of that hardware is to actually do a local scan. That is a customized analysis for your environment. And it means that people are usually combining, in the wild attack, they're using our threat feed, and for the spear phishing detection that are just targeted for your environment, they're using our hardware appliance. And both of these are very well integrated because they're coming from the same vendor, and they gel together very well with each other. But it's up to the people how much depth they want to introduce into their network.
Right. Oh, and I think also the final point is that when you have real-time threat intelligence, there's multiple ways to ingest it, multiple ways to use it, and the best thing we can say to people since we've introduced it is try it. There, we offer free trials of our phishing threat intelligence feed, and you have all the options to pull down one or more of the phishing types and the various formats. And some of the early feedback I think we've had is that there tends to be a pretty large delta between what they're seeing in our feed versus what they're getting from all the other. There's open source feeds, there's various other phishing threat feeds around, but a lot of them are not as fast. And so by the time it appears on one of theirs or in Google's thing, it's a day late or several hours later or even days later, and that's too late.
That's too late, yeah.
It's too late. There, but we can claim it all we want, but the best way to just find out what kind of coverage, what kind of intelligence, what kind of view this would give you is just go ahead and go to /next.com and sign up for a free trial, and you're welcome to encourage anyone viewing this live or on demand later to give it a shot. So with that, we'll call it a wrap here. I appreciate Atif. I was glad we're able to get together on this and share information about the changing landscape and detection and how real-time threat intelligence is produced and can be used. I'm going to look here at one of our helps here, see if there's any questions right now that we want to field live. None now? Okay. All right. Well, then, thank you, everyone, for joining today, and I wish you a good day and a more secure future.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.